Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being on the call. We are going to start very soon, like in 60 seconds, so please stand by. Once again, welcome and good morning. Today's On the Record briefing is hosted jointly by the National Education Association and National PTA. Leading today's call will be Becky Pringle, President of the National Education Association, and Leslie Boggs, President of National PTA. Today's briefing will take about 25 minutes and will be opened by President Pringle and then President Boggs, followed by the presentation of research findings by Missy Agelski of Greenberg Quinlan Rosner Research. Then we'll hear from parent and teacher Pam Gaddy. And finally, Presidents Pringle and Boggs will present some recommendations for addressing students' needs in this time of COVID. Then we're going to open the floor to questions. Right now, I'm going to turn things over to the President of the National Education Association, Becky Pringle.
Thank you so much, Brian. Welcome, everyone. I am very proud to represent the more than 3 million educators across this country who have worked to create safe and just learning environments for all of our students. And I'm also very proud to continue our very strong partnership with the National PTA, working together to listen to the needs of educators, families, and now our students as we face this COVID-19 crisis together. Today's research will tell you a story about our students' struggles, their realities, and their resilience as they navigate the coronavirus pandemic and all the crises it has spawned and exacerbated. The research we did together looks at a cross-section of middle and high school students who, while faced with unprecedented challenges, have demonstrated an extraordinary resilience in the face of this pandemic. The data will tell the story of the impact of this pandemic on all of our students, academically, socially, and economically. You will also hear in their own words what they need as they continue to face this pandemic and move beyond it. As someone who has spent more than 30 years in a classroom, teaching middle-level learners the wonders of science, I know exactly the kind of obstacles this pandemic has created for our students. This is doubly true for our students from Black, Brown, and Native communities, or those who live in poverty or in rural or isolated towns. It will take educators, families, and communities coming together to undo the damage this pandemic has wrought on students and communities. It will also take leadership, and it will take investments from the White House to the local school board to ensure our students have the resources they need to be safe and to have access to just schools. But Leslie and I aren't waiting for anyone to bring us the solutions. We are here today to not only share the voices of our students through this research, but to also talk about solutions our students need and what they are asking for. Leslie?
That's right, Becky. I am so proud to be here with you today. And there's no wonder that you're leading this great organization called NEA. You do a phenomenal job, and we look forward to working with you now and in the future. So let's talk about what I see and what I heard. And I also echo your sentiments about that we really work well together. This partnership that has come together with NEA and PTA, because particularly as that partnership has worked together, we've listened to and advocated for and ensured the needs of educators, families, and students are being met during this COVID-19 pandemic. At National PTA, we have long believed that parents and educators are natural allies and that family engagement in education is essential to students' success. Partnerships between parents and educators and robust and effective family engagement are more important now than ever before during this time of virtual and hybrid learning to support our children's success and make sure they have what they need during this very challenging time. PTA's role is also more important than ever in connecting parents and educators and supporting critical needs of students, families, and their school communities. PTAs across this great nation have been working hard to help families and school communities navigate the challenges that have arisen from this pandemic, focusing on resources for family engagement, resources for distance teaching and learning, bridging the digital divide, social and emotional well-being, and addressing food insecurities. Our association has also been and remains committed to advocating for more resources to be provided immediately to public schools for them to reopen and stay open for in-person instruction, meet the growing academic and social emotional needs of our students, and ensure all students are provided an equitable education and critical supports. As our public schools have been woefully under-resourced for decades, and as underscored by the results of our poll, this next phase of returning to school is also an important chance to ensure every child has every opportunity to reach their fullest potential regardless of their zip code. So Brian, we are looking forward to today's critical conversation.
Great. And now we're going to hear from Pam Gaddy. Pam?
Good morning. I'm Pam Gaddy. I'm a 24-year social studies teacher in Baltimore County Public Schools, and I'm also a mother of four, two of which are still school age, and they also attend Baltimore County schools. I have my 13-year-old daughter, Nija, who is a 7th grader at Perry Hall Middle School, and my son, Noah, 15-year-old sophomore, multimedia production magnet and an avid student at Chesapeake High School. Baltimore County right now is in full virtual learning, and I am eager to share my family's experience with you later on in this call. Thank you.
As Pam said, we are definitely going to hear from her a little bit later, but first, I want to turn it over to Missy Agelski, Senior Vice President at Greenberg Quinlan Rosner Research, to go over the qualitative research and survey findings. Now, please note that at the end of Ms. Agelski's presentation, we'll hear from Pam and once again from Presidents Pringle and Boggs on recommendations for meeting students' needs. You're up, Missy.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. So, I mean, this is a really great research and very robust, and we're very thankful to NEA and the PTA to allow us to do this. You can go on to the methodology, Erica. So what we did here was both qualitative and quantitative research. In October, we conducted 4 focus groups online among a number of distinct groups of students in suburban schools, in urban schools and rural schools, and then a separate group of students of color, about 25 to 30 students a group, 90 minutes, basically in a chat format in which they were very comfortable and really informative groups. And then we followed that with an online survey of those same students, ages 13 to 18, grades 7 to 12. We ended up with 1,300 cases among these public school students. That included 800 public school students nationally, and we also did oversamples because we wanted to get a deeper dive into Black students, Hispanic students, AAPI students, and rural students. Go ahead to the next slide. And I'll give you a kind of overview, and we'll go into some more detail here. The biggest finding that we had is how resilient these kids are in this time of COVID. More than half say that they're doing okay when it comes to handling the pandemic. Almost, 3 in 10 say that they're doing fairly well. Only 16% say that they're struggling with this time. And that's pretty consistent among different groups. That said, this isn't to say, you still do have 16% who say they're struggling. And a number of those, it's coming from social deprivation, from economic issues in their household, and it's particularly strong among students of color. Most of the students that are in the survey were taking classes full-time online. About a quarter are saying that they were taking classes full-time in person, and a quarter were full or a hybrid of online and in person. The students, some of them prefer the online learning and are doing really well in this, but there are a significant number, and what we've seen here is that there's a lot of academic decline, people who were doing well and think that now that they're struggling a bit more. And what we do see is that students want to see some live instruction, part of the time here, but not necessarily a majority of the time. And I think that the reason that what the kids are missing is that they really appreciate their teachers here. They think that they're doing their best under the circumstances. Huge amounts say that they trust that their teachers are teaching them in ways that will help them grow and that they're getting a good education even in this pandemic time. And to the point that they really trust their teachers and want more of that. We asked in the focus groups what would help them and quantified it in the survey, and one-on-one teacher-student interaction was by far the biggest goal for them and the thing that they think would help them most. So going into some of the numbers here, as I mentioned, about 56% say that they're doing okay handling the coronavirus outbreak. You can see here the black bar, that is the people that say that they're struggling, and it's 16% overall. It's not a dramatic difference, but there is slightly higher numbers among Black and Hispanic students, where 18 and 19% respectively say that they're struggling. Try to do the next. In our focus groups, we dug into this a little bit, and you can see that the folks that are struggling are people, what they're having a hard time with, or that's harder, is the isolation from their friends, not being able to hang out with people, just, seeing someone, people in the rural areas, they're not close to their friends. There's a really hard time seeing anybody else. Some of them are also struggling with their parents losing jobs and recognition of the economic hardship that this pandemic is causing. At the same time, there's, some have some silver linings in with their families and opportunities. People in the focus groups, these kids said that, they're taking up cooking, they're taking up running and exercising and getting more involved in fitness. And frankly, that, things that they hadn't done before, that they're spending more time with their family and that they're enjoying that. And then the last thing is that, there were some people that that decided that this pandemic was eye-opening for them, and they wanted to think about going into biology or pre-med or something that would allow them to do research and help in this time. When we looked at people, what they've experienced specifically, the students, about 4 in 10 have at least a friend who got sick with the coronavirus, a little less if you're talking about someone in their own household or them themselves. There's also a lot of instances where the students recognize that, there's loss of income, losses of jobs, themselves either lost a job or income at this time. And there are some differences here that I'll, go into in the next slide among people of color. And particularly Black students are most likely to recognize these economic struggles. 44% had one of the adults in the household lose income. 37% had one of their, someone in their household lose their job. So, it's been much tougher for some of the students of color economically, they're facing bigger struggles. When you get into education, and this is what I noted in the key findings slide, you have, and this is self-report in both places where, students sometimes say that they're doing better than they are, but this is, both saying before the pandemic began, 58% of students said that they were doing well, 36% okay, 6% said they're struggling. Now, you can see that, by 26 points, a drop in the people that are students that say that they're doing well. Some of it's gone to doing okay, has gone up to 48%, but there's really a dramatic increase from 6% to 20% in the students who are struggling now that weren't necessarily struggling before. So that drop in the decline is something that's really important. And again, there are some interesting dynamics of who this is being affected by. The next slide. There's not as much in this dynamic change in students of different color that those are all very, very consistent. Where people you see the students that are younger that don't necessarily have as much practice in autonomous learning and being able to work on their own and deal with some of the online stuff. Ages 13 to 15, 57% of the total student population, but there's 62% of the people who said that they were doing well and are now struggling. Similarly, in that same vein, grades 7 to 8 in that same category, there's a bigger increase, a much bigger proportion of the students who were doing well but are struggling. And the last part is, students who don't have a parent, either parent has a college degree. That's 28% of the student population, but 34% of those who are saw a big decline. Okay. And when we looked into the online versus in person, you see a lot of students that are thriving in this environment. They like being able to sleep in and not have to get on the bus or get to school early and that commute, like staying in their pajamas and learning at their own pace. They just feel real relaxed. And some of them honestly are, enjoy having to take the pressures of being a teenager off. They're not, the cliques and the clothes and gossips and bullies are really, not as much of a factor for them right now. At the same time, there are people that are struggling. I think there's something that we can all relate to is like the student said, I feel like a Zoom zombie. I'm, having a hard time learning at the pace of the teachers. It's hard to stay motivated when it's just me and a computer screen. So now this is something, these suggestions for how to help there. These came out of the focus groups. We asked students in an open-ended format to what would be helpful to them. And then we asked those same proposals that they offered in the survey. And you can see here the pieces that are highlighted in yellow, it's all focused on interaction with teachers. More interaction with teachers and students, 49% say that would be very helpful to them in helping them learn. Additional tutoring, 48%. More feedback from teachers, 48%. More one-on-one time, 47%. For that, an intense category like very helpful, that's a really big number. And additional office hours, 37%, a little bit down there, but also involved in teacher interaction. And what you can see here also is that we took a look at the students that said that they were doing well or doing okay and are now struggling. And those students are much higher and really, really seeking more interaction with their teachers and being able to get have resources that they can be able to talk with their teachers, help them get feedback. Nearly 2/3 are looking for that more interaction between the teachers and themselves. When we looked at what students prefer, it's fairly split on whether they want to stay in person or full-time online. 38% said that they would like to be full-time in person. 35% full-time online. So it's fairly split, with another 27%, part-time in person and online, that hybrid. And you can see that there, when you combine those, at least some in person, 65%, at least some online, 62%. So there's not a lot of difference there, but slightly more for in-person education. And part of the reason is, we're really struck by how thoughtful these students were. Went into this with some concern that they would not take the research seriously, but you can see that they really, they get this virus and they're understanding, they're fearful of the ramifications of going to school in person. And, a lot of them are in generation households. They've seen some deaths. They're, parents are people that are in risky situations and like high risk, and they don't want to put their family at risk. So they prefer to be at home, and they want to be with their friends and be with the teachers, but they're trying to be safe than sorry, and they really are showing a lot of concern for their families. And this is really a great thing that I also came out of the focus groups that was really revealing and showed thoughtfulness. Kind of expected some snark about teachers, but the huge majorities of these kids really trust their teachers. They were in the focus groups were really sort of very, very thoughtful and understanding about their teachers, understanding what they're going through, and that they're really trying their best, and that this is a tough situation. And they think that the teachers are doing a great job doing that. That regardless of how they're going to school, they think that they're getting good education and learning what the teachers are teaching. 76% say that that's true. 88%, an overwhelming amount, trust their teachers to teach you in ways that are going to help them grow as a student this year during the pandemic. And that's our thoughts here. So I think I'm passing it back to Brian.
That's correct. Thanks a lot, Missy. A lot of good information there. Obviously, the numbers only paint part of the picture. We've asked Pam to come back and share her experiences to put these numbers into the context of lived experience. Pam?
Hi again. It's interesting to hear those national research findings because they do kind of mirror my household itself. My daughter, who's actually in 8th grade, and I said 7th grader before, she receives special services. She's a student with an IEP, and she's continuing to adjust to remote learning. There are some advantages that she enjoys. However, my son Noah, this isn't an enjoyable moment for him. So when I'm hearing and reading about some of the students who were surveyed, I kind of think of Nija in particular. So Nija, she enjoys being able to not have to worry about her hair, her makeup, but rather eyeshadow, and figuring that part out and commuting to and from school. She literally rolls out of bed and she comes downstairs to the basement with me, and she has a desk and she sits right next with me. Whereas her receiving her special services, this format creates a challenge for her. However, she has some very supportive teachers, and they're helping provide all of her support services that are needed. But again, she continues to struggle, which wasn't uncommon in the beginning, but it's less anxiety for her in her case. Whereas Noah, he's a student with a 504 plan, and he's having a different experience. He's a student athlete, so he misses that social interaction. He misses face-to-face collaboration with his teachers. Of course, he misses his teammates in competition. And he's a 15-year-old boy, so he misses girls too. So and there's a lifelong experiences and memories that we should be creating in this time frame. Unfortunately, he's not able to create. And that takes a toll on him as well. So, he's the type of student that he has to stay back after class just to make sure that he's done what the teacher expected of him, to make sure that he's on the right track. He needs that immediate feedback for him to continue on as he believes he's expected to. And, myself as an educator, I know how hard it is for teachers as we're working on this online environment, and the amount of work that we now have, which is way different than a normal class setting for us. But just like the students that are in the survey, my students are resilient. My children are resilient, and they're looking for the silver lining at the end of all of this. And they are rising to the challenges. They truly, truly are. And for the most part, we as adults aren't giving them credit for this. So, educators and students, we want to be back in the classroom. We really do. But we want to do it safely. And safety is my top priority. It should be the top priority. It has to be for myself, for my students, for my children, my colleagues. And as an educator who is a parent and an advocate, I just want to thank you, Becky and Leslie, for your leadership. And, as we navigate education through this crisis, I sincerely appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Oh my, Leslie, Leslie, I think you would join me in saying that Pam did such an incredible job of making what we're talking about, our students, their lives, very, very real. Thank you so much, Pam, for giving us your perspective as a parent and as an educator, and bringing light to the complexities of the challenges that our students, our families, our parents face. We cannot hear Pam's story and see the story of these numbers and what they tell us without calling for the solutions our students themselves are asking for, and that parents and educators like Pam so need. We know that the trauma and disruption of 2020 this year, which will be soon coming to an end, but the disruptions will play an enduring role in our students' lives in the very near future. These students make it clear that yes, they are struggling with the amount of disruption and trauma they faced already this year. And they also are making it clear that they have a sense of their own agency, and they show resilience, as they always do. They've done a lot to adapt to their current reality. But that said, a significant number of American public school students suffer from social isolation and economic insecurity. Most especially are students of color, students living in poverty or isolated communities. These students in particular know their academics are paying a price because of this pandemic. But I am heartened by the feedback that shows they genuinely believe their teachers and other educators are doing their best under these very trying circumstances. Listen to these students and you will hear them say they need additional instructional and social emotional learning support, while school districts are in fully remote or hybrid mode, and even when they're in person. And they'll continue to need that support when we all return to that in-person learning. They want more time with their educators, getting tutoring and one-on-one time to help them keep pace and catch up on their lessons. We recommend working with educators to design school days that include extra office hours with teachers, paraprofessionals, school counselors, and social workers, all of those educators we know our students need. This is particularly needed for younger students. Listen to the students and you will hear them say how they and their peers struggle to get the tools and internet access they can be connected to those educators. We recommend programs that will ensure equitable digital access for all of our students and our educators. And you can get more information about state-specific information on that particular recommendation in NEA's report on digital equity at nea.org/digital equity. And there are more recommendations that we want to share with you. Leslie?
Thank you, Becky. In addition to those recommendations that Becky shared, our organizations recommend that educational stakeholders and local, state, and federal policymakers ensure high standards continue to be met while adjusting the kinds of assignments and tasks required of students to ensure essential elements of the coursework are prioritized and account for challenges inherent in this virtual or hybrid instruction. You know, in the poll, students self-reported an academic decline. Adjusting the kinds of assignments and tasks required of students to account for the challenges inherent in this virtual and hybrid learning will help support their success during this critical time. And at the same time, ensuring high standards continue to be met is critical to ensuring students don't fall further behind. National PTA and NEA also recommend that a robust family engagement plan is implemented in every school to support interactions between educators, students, and families, particularly during this virtual and hybrid learning, and to raise awareness of the value of such interactions in student progress, safety, and well-being. Research has long shown that when families and teachers work together, students do so much better in school. So in addition to being important to support students academically, strong family-school partnerships are also critical to support students socially and emotionally in ensuring their safety. Strong family-school partnerships help in identifying areas in which students are struggling and ensuring they get the support they need before falling further behind. As families are educating their children at home while juggling work and other responsibilities and supporting the social and emotional needs of their children, they need significantly more support. They didn't sign up to be a teacher, so we need to be there for them. So National PTA has been urging Congress to provide an emergency one-time investment of $245.5 million for the statewide Family Engagement Centers grant program to really support and implement more family engagement in the school communities. Statewide family engagement centers can help teachers be the conduit for learning at home and provide families with simple and effective activities that they can do with their children so that families aren't overwhelmed by the myriad of resources available. Equally important is the ability of these engagement centers to directly and effectively connect with low-income families, students learning English, and other marginalized student groups who are most likely to be impacted by school closures to ensure that equity is at the forefront of virtual and education offerings. Robust and effective family engagement plans are more important than ever before to support our students' progress and success and ensure their safety and well-being. And they also support our teachers who need our help now more than ever in ensuring everyone's success. So Becky, any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Thank you so much, Leslie, and thanks to the entire National PTA organization. It is critical that families and educators keep a close partnership always, and especially at a time like this. There's more detail on these recommendations in the media materials you will receive, and you'll find those along with more expansive recommendations for meeting students' needs on our websites, NEA.org and PTA.org. These young people we spoke to deeply believe in their power to change the world for the better. And NEA and the National PTA are committed to working in collaboration with families and communities to make sure all of our students get everything they need to make that happen. Brian?
All right, thanks a lot, Becky. Right now, we are going to open the floor and take some questions. I just want to remind the reporters who are on the line that you can use the Q&A function as well as the chat box. As you're typing your question in, though, just make sure that you give us your name as well as the media outlet that you work for. Right now, we have one question in the chat, but I think we can definitely get some more in there, but let's start with this one. I believe it's from Victoria Pasquantonio with the PBS NewsHour, and I hope I certainly pronounced your name correctly. Her question is, were you, and I believe this is for Missy, but I believe if all of our panelists want to weigh in, by all means do so. Were you able to get any sense of students' anxiety being attributed to fear of getting COVID at school and fear of their schools not being safe enough? You're on mute, Missy.
I'll start and let the others jump in here. From the focus groups that we saw, it wasn't so much anxiety from the students. There were some comments of students that were a little bit unhappy or upset of going back to school, that that they were seeing other teachers that weren't enforcing mask mandates. The other students were pretty careless in their mask usage, and that made them uptight and like a little bit anxious about that. But as we showed in the presentation, the anxiety wasn't as much about fear for themselves getting it, but that they would take it home and impact their family, and just basically sort of upset that not everyone was looking out for each other.
Do any of our other panelists want to weigh in?
I'm glad you added that at the end, Missy. What showed up in what the students said was that they really understood the complexities of this challenge. They really, really did. It was quite amazing. And I'm always so proud of our students and their ability to synthesize and analyze things, because you're right, they were worried about their families. They were worried about their communities. And even though, as you pointed out, Missy, there was a slight, and it was slight, right, preference to be fully in person, they understood that safety for their families was paramount.
Once again, we're taking your questions. You can use the Q&A function to type your question there. Just make sure that you give us your name as well as the media outlet that you work for. Our next question is coming from Jason Miles from KHOU TV in Houston. And his question is, any information on if students in this area were part of the survey? I believe that's a question for you, Missy.
Yeah, I mean, this was the 800 base sample that we used was representative across the nation of public school students. So it's very likely, given the population of Houston, that there are students from that area in the survey. It wouldn't be significant enough to break out in any meaningful way to get a reliable sample, but there definitely should be students from that area included.
All right. Right now, we have no questions in the queue, so if you have something on your mind that you'd like to ask the panelists, by all means, put it in the chat queue. Actually, we do have one. Kara Arundel from K-12 Dive. Do you attribute the levels of satisfaction with virtual learning to the fact that the virus is still a threat? In other words, do you expect more students to prefer in-person learning once the pandemic is over? Once again, Missy, I think that's probably to you, but the other panelists, feel free to weigh in as well.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, as Becky mentioned, the students are very thoughtful and cognizant of what's happening right now and the challenges and what they need to be doing in this moment. I think that, once there is a widespread vaccination and the pandemic seems to be under control, right now, there's a very slight preference for in-person. I think that will, once they feel safe for themselves and their families, that will increase and wanting to go back. There are some that really are thriving and would probably prefer to stay online, but I think for the most part, once they fully feel safe, that they would prefer to be back with their teachers and their friends.
I know as a high school teacher, my school district had already offered what we call e-learning option for some students. What a lot of people don't understand that sometimes the in-house school setting is not appropriate for some students. And this was an option prior to COVID. And now some other students were able to experience this. So I do believe once COVID is over, this will still be an option for students, because we found a lot of students to excel in this environment. And it's not just the online format, but it's that closeness of home. It's the not worrying about the interactions if that student was a true introvert from prior to. So this is an opportunity for students on different levels, even outside of COVID. And once we realize that there are truly different methods to reach our students and we can deliver those, we will see a turn overall post-COVID, because we believe that's actually a term, post-COVID. So we know it's going to return to normal, but our students are going to choose their path, and they're going to show again how well they can do, how well they excel, and what is best for them. We will no longer be able to dictate that for students anymore. And this format, this opportunity now allows students to speak up for themselves and advocate for themselves and what works best for them.
And I couldn't agree more. Sorry, Becky.
No, go ahead, Leslie.
From the parents and families that we're hearing and talking to their students, is that students really want to be back in person, but there are those that have really thrived in this virtual world, and they will continue to want to do that. I don't think education will ever be the same again. I think it will change. I think there's opportunities. We're learning and we're seeing how much better we can do things. And I think that's really important, don't you, Becky, that we really have kind of crossed that bridge.
I completely agree. And I would also say, Missy, when we looked at what the students said in the focus groups and the challenges that they raised, from bullying to putting on makeup, Pam, in the morning. These are real issues for students, and we need to be leaning into how we are working collaboratively with them and their families to solve these issues, regardless of whether they're in person or they are virtual. Bullying is real, and we have to figure out how we create safe learning environments for all of our students, no matter what kind of learning environment they're in. So there's so much to unpack in this survey, but especially what the students said to us, so that we can learn and make the opportunities for all of our students even better post-pandemic.
And I think that's really why it's so important that we see that the family-school partnership, that family engagement is going to be so vital in student success. It's vital now, but it's going to be even more so in the future. And so those conversations are critical to their students' success. And so we look forward to that happening.
Yeah, I think that, I was really struck, by, in the focus groups, there were some really heartbreaking stories and of students, and they like the online environment so much more because they had faced such, terrible times with bullying, and they just felt so much more comfortable and able to participate academically in a safer space for themselves.
All right, our next question is coming from Emily Bamforth with the Cleveland Plain Dealer. As students obviously seek more connections with teachers, what can be done to support teachers who are facing burnout from either working in unprecedented circumstances in the classroom or digital environment? And parenthetically, she says, this can be either policy or specific school level measures. Becky, do you want to take this one?
I do, but I want Pam to talk first. And I'll hit cleanup, Pam.
That's a huge question. I believe the first thing that we must do is acknowledge that there is teacher burnout. Mm-hmm. That as much as we are focusing on our students' mental health, as much as we are looking how fragile our kids are right now, sometimes no one is saying how fragile our teachers have become. Our home lives have been changed just as much. Our social lives have changed. So we have a lot of kids who have anxiety. They're not being able to be with their friends. You have teachers and educators who are feeling the same way. Our personal relationships have been strained through this pandemic. And that kind of doesn't seem to be the conversation at the table. We have a lot of parents who still believe that the reason why some school systems aren't open is because the teachers, not the numbers, not the safety protocol, not the CDC, but it's the teachers. So that weighs on us tremendously because I want to do everything absolutely possible for my students. But in my 24 years, this is the first time that I can say personally, I had to say to my school system and say to my parents, I have to come first. I can't do this time around. I have to check on me, but we don't have enough. We don't have a lot of teachers who are willing to do that. So the first thing we need to do is acknowledge that what teachers are feeling and how overwhelmed we are. Policy would be great, and a lot of the and the contracts that that are being negotiated through locals and state legislation, we need to identify and have specific language that identifies teacher mental health. You know, we have to acknowledge it. We have to say it honestly, and you know, we just and have to have grace with our educators that some days I can't do this. And it's not because I don't love your child. It's not that I don't love my career. It's because I love me just a little extra today that I had to say, I cannot do this. And I need you to respect that. Because if I'm not good as a mother, if I'm not good as a person, if Pam isn't good, there's nothing I can do for your child. And I have to recognize that. And I need you to acknowledge that. And I need you to respect that. And that's what a lot of us aren't feeling, although the majority of community do support us. But we know that little number of people kind of seep under our skin, and it's painful, it's hurtful. And we're getting it just from all angles. And it doesn't seem that we don't get our, you know, our captain come save the teacher to protect us sometimes. We kind of feel a little out there on our own. We're on the raft, we're just treading water, and no one says, what do you need? So that question, first thing you need to acknowledge that we too are overwhelmed. We're in a bubble of emotions, and some of us cannot handle it all the time. If you just acknowledge that from the beginning, then we can have a great conversation, and I'm pretty sure everyone could understand our point of view.
Thank you, Pam. I needed folks to hear you say that as both an educator and as a parent who wants the best for her children and wants all of the educators in your children's lives to be safe and whole and be able to be in a space with them so that they can be their fullest self for their students, but they can't do that if they're not taking care of themselves. A couple of things, and I really want to emphasize this because so many times when things are written up or said again, the details get lost. So Leslie and I talked about the recommendations coming from this survey. And I was very explicit, but I want to say this again. Our students are asking for more time with their teachers and other educators. They're asking for more office hours. And I was very explicit in the way I said it, and I want to say it again. We're not talking about adding on to a teacher's day. We're talking about collaborating with educators in a way that they restructure a day so that they can provide those kinds of things that the students are asking for. So that's first. And then Leslie also pointed out the fact that we need resources, and that's what we've been talking about. We've been waiting since May for Congress to act on the HEROES Act. We've lost almost 1 million educators, have been laid off or have not been hired because of freezes, because Congress has not given states and localities the money they need. So we have less educators that are there to provide that one-on-one instruction. So I want to be really, really clear about what Pam just said. We're not talking about putting more on the educators that are already doing their best to stand in the gaps for our babies. We're talking about making sure that we hear what Pam said. That's why NEA has engaged in a partnership with the Yale Center on Social and Emotional Learning. And they are, Pam, they are looking at it holistic. It's for the educators and the students. And they did a Wordle with our educators. And the number one thing that came up was that our teachers don't feel appreciated. That was the number one thing. And that they are overwhelmed in what they're doing. And so we are working with them so that we can develop the skills so that we can take care of ourselves and teach our students the skills so they can take care of themselves as well. Thank you, Pam, for putting your voice in this room for all of our educators and our students.
And so Pam, I want to echo what Becky said. I know you mentioned that it was just that there are those few that are not your fans as teachers, But I want you to know that most parents in today's virtual environment have learned how valuable teachers are. And they know that you need the resources to help their child succeed, and they want you to get what you need. And so my cry to Congress is this: for decades, we've under-resourced and underfunded public schools. It's time that we give our public schools the resources needed and the funding needed to really help our teachers succeed, which then means what? Our students succeed, which then they are the foundation of our nation's success. So let's get this going. Let's get this message out here that it's time. Congress needs to step up and do what's right. And so again, Pam, we appreciate you and all the teachers that are behind you so very much. And the parents are standing there behind you and ready to advocate for you.
All right, our next question is from the PBS NewsHour once again. What's the best way to discuss these findings with school administrators, and what do you want them to take away from this report? Who'd like to take that one?
So I'll start. One of the things that we, the NEA, will be doing is providing the space and the information so to allow our educators to speak with purpose and passion, and most especially power. And that's what this information does, that they have the opportunity to advocate for their students, for themselves, for our schools in this moment. Because here's the thing, our administrators are in this too, to Pam's point. All of us are struggling. All of us are humans. And we are dealing with trauma and grief and loss of a lot. If we look at how we are going to build the systems and processes and structures to actually support and sustain collaboration. Talk about it's time, Leslie, you're right. It is time that we stop blaming each other. It is time that we come together. Our babies are depending on all of us to get this right. And that can't happen if we're not coming together to do that. And so for us, we are going to make sure that our educators have the opportunity to collaborate from a place of power and knowledge with this information, because we must, as a system, solve these systemic inequities in a way that not only addresses what our students need today, but actually makes systemic changes for what we know and what we want their future to be.
Would anyone else like to weigh in on that? We still have some time.
I think Becky did a great job.
I agree. I agree. I just want to alert the media on the line that we still have some time left to get your questions answered. You can put them in the Q&A function, or you can put them in the chat. Either one, we'll get to them. Give it a couple of seconds. If there are no more questions, though, I think that's probably going to do it for us. Just want to take the time to thank everybody for joining this call, and have a safe and happy holiday.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.